Welcome, my friends, to the Sage Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Today, Richard Balducci returns to the show. This is episode 1 of a 5-hour discussion I had with Richard to further explore the occult aspects of the Beatles. This segment sets up the upcoming shows by covering the fundamental components of the occult as we take a deeper dive into the Beatles with episodes 2 and 3 scheduled for November and December of 2019. And so without further ado, here's Richard. Well, folks, we have a great show, and I know I always say that, but this is going to be a great show because Richard Balducci is back with us, and Richard and I did the first show, and the number of emails and personal messages and comments that I received about people wanting Richard to come back and talk more about the occult and the Beatles was phenomenal. So Richard is back, and this show is going to take as long as it needs to be in order for Richard to walk us through the information that he has for us today, which is a lot. So I have an outline in front of me here, and we're going to get into some very, very interesting discussion. So Richard, thank you so much for being back. You are a star.
Well, let's hope I'm not a shooting star. Yeah. Or, it's great to be here, Michael. You're the great sage, and this part 2 of the occultology of the Beatles is going to be so much darker. I hope people can take it, because I heard some of them were freaking out last time, so I don't know what they're going to do this time.
Yeah, some people have a very hard time with the occult, Richard. It's because they have this understanding or this view of the Beatles where there is this sense of purity, especially the pre-1967 Beatles, the Mop Tops. And so when we start to get into discussions about the fact that even the Fab Four, the Mop Tops, were immersed in the occult, many people can't handle that. It's like Jack Nicholson said, you can't handle the truth. Well, that's the case with some people, but we're going to plow ahead anyway because the truth is the truth.
And the truth is wild.
I'm sure it is.
I think we should start at one of the most important things to know about the occult that is really totally kept secret, and it's a profound fact. There is a relationship between our moon here on planet Earth and the black sun, Saturn, that we talked about. And the key fact is that it takes Saturn, the black sun, 29 and a half Earth years to go once around the sun from Earth's viewpoint. The thing about the moon is it takes 29 and a half days to make one complete circuit of the Earth. So my point is, every time Saturn, the black sun, makes one orbit around the sun, our moon has made exactly 365 and a quarter orbits of the Earth, which is in resonance with the Gregorian calendar of 365 and a quarter days.
Very interesting. I did not know that.
Well, you're not supposed to. I'm not even supposed to know it.
See that? We're like 5 minutes into this and I've already learned something new.
Oh, God forbid. Yeah. Well, we better take that out. So that's do you have any more questions about Saturn?
I do not, Professor. You may proceed.
All right. Well, to just go off course here for a brief crazy moment, I got to tell you some breaking occult news that I just came up with last night. I was looking, because we're in the 20th anniversary of Stanley Kubrick's last movie, Eyes Wide Shut, which is a masterpiece, by the way. Well, I found out that Stanley Kubrick has the record with that movie of a major movie having the longest shooting schedule. It took exactly 400 days. So I started applying archaeocultology to that, and I found out that if you multiply, hang on, you better strap yourself in. If you multiply 66.666 times 6, you get 400. So Eyes Wide Shut is really giving Rosemary's Baby, they're neck and neck for which is the most occult satanic movie of all time.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
And keep in mind, of course, Stanley Kubrick died March the 7th, 1999, which is exactly 666 days before New Year's Day, January the 1st, 2001, which is his signature movie, 2001.
Right. Right.
So that was well planned.
Yeah. A lot of people have a hard time with the whole planning piece of this, Richard. People have asked me, are there actually people in the priest class planning this stuff, or is it an algorithm that is actually embedded into the fabric of reality? I mean, I don't know the answer to that. My thought is that it's both, probably both, that the numbers are built into the actual reality, but there are also people who are in the priest class that are exploiting these occulted dates and numbers to make things happen. That's just a thought that I had.
Right. They're creating the reality to their schedule for us,
Okay.
I mean, it's like 1 nautical mile, which is equal to 6,075 feet, divided by 666, gives you 9.11. 911.
Yeah.
It's worked into everything.
Yeah.
You can't get away from it, no matter where you turn. It's on the dollar bill. This is like everybody who thinks 666 and all this is just kooky talk. Every time you spend $1 bill, you are using occultism, because there's I don't know if you can see this, and you can do a better version, but on the back of the dollar bill, at the base of the 13-step pyramid, are 9 Roman numerals: MDCCLXXVI. So M is 1,000, D is 500, C is 100, C is 100, L is 50, X is 10, X is 10, V is 5, and I is 1. So if you make 3 more pyramids with the capstone missing, for those of you at home playing the Sage of Quay home game, and you put it in order, starting at the top and going top, bottom left, bottom right. So you put M at the top, D at the bottom, C at the bottom right, C at the top of the middle pyramid, L at the bottom left, X at the bottom right, X at the top of the third pyramid, V at the bottom of the third pyramid on the left, I on the right. We'll ignore the top for right now, but if we add up the bottom, the base of the pyramid, 500 plus 100, D plus C is 600, and L50 plus 10X is 60, and gosh, what will that third one be? Oh, I know, 5V plus I1 is 6. So 666 is on every dollar bill, hidden in plain sight. Now, the question is, what does the top 1,110 mean? Well, here we go. 1,000 times 666 gives you 666,000, which is the mass of the sacred star Sepsothis Sirius. It's equal to 666,000 Earth masses, which is twice the mass of our sun. The middle one, C100, 100 times 666, gives you 66,600, which is the Earth's orbital speed around the sun, not its rotational speed, but its orbital speed. And then 10 times 666 just so happens to give us the height of the Washington Monument obelisk in inches. And at its base, it's 55 and a half feet, so we get more 666 fun there. It's encoded, embedded. So every time you spend $1, people that think these numbers, you can add anything to anything and come up with anything. Well, actually, in mathematics, you can't do that. You can't do that in geometry either. There's sacred geometry. You can't even talk to those kind of people. But every time you spend $1, you're, kind of worshiping Baphomet in a way.
Well, Victoria and I spoke about this with the Sharon Tate interview that we did, Richard, and she was not originally a believer in the numbers, but then it's the patterns. There are recurring patterns of these numbers, and so maybe once or twice you could say it's a coincidence, but once you start looking into it, you realize that it's not coincidence at all, that it's embedded in everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
Proceed, counselor.
So
let's talk about that Baphomet for a second, if you don't mind. Let's talk about him behind his back before he hears out. Why is a goat associated with Baphomet, who's kind of a scary dude? Well, first of all, Baphomet is known as the Sabbatic goat, and Saba in ancient Egypt means star. So we have that. Also, goats have 13 points on them. They have 2 pointy ears. They have 2 pointy horns. They have cloven hooves. So they have 4 feet. You're into the toe stuff here. So on a goat, you've got cloven hooves. 4 feet times 2 is 8. And then they've got 1 pointy beard, nice touch. So we have, and we also, goats, they're sneaky little things. Goats actually scream and they faint. They can be quite comical. And another thing about goats is they're traitors, because they use goats to lead animals to their slaughter.
Well, we have the Judas goat in the Bible, right?
The Judas goat, yes. And of course, gotia is Greek for witchcraft. It's sorcery, wizardry. I mean, I can go on and on about that. And, King Solomon, in the Old Testament, he used the Ars Gotia to invoke demons. There's a whole thing about that.
Yeah.
So they're telling you basically the goat is, used to invoke demons. You remember on 9/11, there were some pictures that day when it was all going on and all over the news where they showed a demon in the smoke.
Yes. Well, and George Bush was reading that book, My Pet Goat.
Speaking of another demon, I've got that book, and I had to, you wouldn't believe what I went through to get a hold of this goat here, this book. I just made a slip. This is what the book looks like, My Pet Goat. And it's actually, it's full of different stories. They're real short, and there's 2 stories about the pet goat in there, not just one, like the Twin Towers. There's 2, not just one. So in the first short story, they get this pet goat, this family, and he's really cool. And the word goat, by the way, is mentioned 11 times in both goat stories. In the second goat story, called The Goat Stops the Robber, a robber is trying to hijack somebody's red convertible, but the goat sees him, and he's a hero, and he butts the bad guy and saves the day, which is the exact reverse of what happened. During 9/11, it was reversed, supposedly, according to the official story. So that's why George W. Bush, in that school down in Florida, was so riveted to the story about the goat that he sat there for, what was it, 18 minutes? 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. So, I mean, he was so thrilled by that goat story that he really couldn't process the biggest mass murder in United States history happening at the exact same time. What scares me is that records are made to be broken.
Richard, that whole scene when he was in the classroom just reeked of ritual. I noticed that when one of his aides, I forgot the name of the guy, walked over and whispered in his ear, it was almost like a trigger word. And he zoned out, almost went into a trance.
I didn't think about that. That was Andrew Card.
Andrew Card, that's right.
Yeah, where he whispered something.
And you could see Bush, all of a sudden, he just went into a trance state. And the other thing I noticed about that video is when you look at his eyes look very, very black. Bush's eyes look very, very black and dark in that video. And I tried to figure out whether it was the light in the room or it just looked very black. And then we had the teacher. She was had the kids reciting almost like a mantra or something, right? About the steel kite. I don't know. The whole thing was very, very weird. So the first time that I actually watched that, at first, of course, I didn't put it together. But as I did more and more research into the occult, I became aware that that's what was taking place in that classroom. He was participating in a ritual ceremony that was the lead up, or that was, maybe we should say, reinforcing what took place on 9/11.
Right. Wow, that's very insightful, Sage. See, that's why you're the sage. You come up with that stuff.
Well, that's just my opinion.
That's MK Ultra in action. Across the nation, emanating from that schoolroom. And MK Ultra is, kid tested, government approved. So, there you go.
Yeah. Well, anybody who's interested, maybe I'll put it in this video. Take a look at when Andrew Card whispers into George Bush's ear. Something very weird takes place at that moment. It's like a switch was thrown.
Wow, a trigger word, like you said, or something.
Trigger word.
I didn't think of that, man. That's wow.
Yeah.
It's like when we get together, we're sharpening each other's minds, I love it.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's good to have these discussions because otherwise you'll be talking to yourself.
Right. There's not too many people you can have these kind of discussions with where you're not like restrained, in a thing like that.
I tried it at Thanksgiving. It didn't go well.
Oh, man, I can't believe it. I would think your family would be like your biggest boosters or something.
No.
You're like the genius child of the family.
No, I'm the black sheep of the family.
You're not even a gray sheep. What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, I have the same problem that everybody else has who looks into this stuff. Most of your family and friends, they'd rather not talk to you about this stuff. They'd rather just pretend that you don't do this or talk about it and go on and talk about superficial things,
Well, Sage, I can tell you from the heart, if you're the black sheep, then you got the golden fleece, my friend. So I think they're a little jealous that you got the golden fleece.
Well, I will see. I don't know. I know. I just think they think I'm crazy. But in any case, we know that you and I are not crazy, and the folks listening to the show are not, that we're actually awake and trying to figure things out. So,
it almost would be preferable that we were crazy and somebody gave us some medication that snapped us all out of it. And we realized, we got it all wrong. Sorry, I almost long to be able to go back to when I was just a happy-go-lucky, spirit. But, but there's a weight to this knowledge, too. We recognize that so much of it is profound, sacred knowledge. It's really got to be shared, The people need to know.
They do need to know. And it is, a lot of times, Richard, it's very heavy. It weighs on you. And that's why sometimes I tell folks who are in the truth community, my network of friends and colleagues, some of them will say, this stuff is heavy, it's dark, it's depressing. I said, well, you have to take a step back and you have to step away from it. you also have to live your life. Go spend time with your friends and your family and your children and go do things. If you stay hunkered down in this stuff all the time, then yeah, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. So you do have to take a break, clear your head, and then you can come back to it.
Well, there's a reason why they name them Grimm's fairy tales, you know? They didn't name them happy time fun stories.
Right. Good point.
You know, Snow White, the poison apple, the witch, you know? Don't get me started. Don't get me started down that road. It's all twisted. I don't even go see like movies that have a dog in them anymore, because I know after Old Yeller, you know, they got me with that one. I didn't see it coming. I mean, my heart was destroyed for years on, you know, on that. So Marley and Me, you know, forget it.
Old Yeller was brutal. I watched that when I was, I read that when I was in elementary school, and it was devastating.
Oh, did they make you read it, or you just picked it up?
Yeah, it was like required
they make
reading.
us read it. They're warping us.
Yeah. Man,
to desensitize us, I guess, you know. It's just a dog.
So where were we?
Yeah. Well, we were somewhere on planet Earth, spiraling out of control, I think. Oh, yeah, there was something I wanted to read about the number 6. See, there were a lot of heroes back in World War I and World War II, but the real star of World War II was the number 6. So this might take me a moment to find it. So
yeah, take your time. It's
okay.
Very important that we talk about the number 6 because so many people don't understand what it means.
Well, it's a perfect number for one thing. And of course, last time we learned about 666 being in the barcode.
Right.
This is about really a half a page, but I'll read it quickly.
Okay, yeah, take your time.
This is from my first book, On Earth as It Is in Heaven. Turning to chapter page 229 in our hymnals. Okay. After the successful detonation of the original atomic bomb, the gadget, and then the Hiroshima thing, and by the way, obelisks mark the Trinity test site, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. They all have obelisks for monuments. So basically, they shipped the bombs to San Francisco first in Northern California, where they were loaded. I'm talking about the cores of the bombs, where they were loaded onto a ship named the USS Indianapolis. As the USS Indianapolis sailed out to sea, it first sailed beneath the 500-foot tall twin spans of the Golden Gate Bridge, which was symbolically significant because since its deadly cargo was to be deployed against Japan, which is known as the land of the rising sun. So in actuality, the USS Indianapolis and the atomic bombs named Little Boy and Fat Man sailed 6,000 inches beneath the twin trusses of the Golden Gate Bridge. It sailed 6,000 miles to its destination of Tinian Island, where 6,000 Japanese soldiers died trying to defend Tinian Island. The vessel sailed exactly 600 miles per day to the island of Tinian, which featured 60 lanes of 6 runways to eventually transport an atomic bomb that contained 2 cores containing a combined total of 141 pounds, 1 plus 4 plus 1 is 6, of uranium hexafluoride, hexa, which, hexagram, black sun, to carry out a presidential decision made on June the 1st, 1945, to atomically bomb the island of Japan, which was exactly 66 days before the atomic sacrifice of the citizens of Hiroshima on August the 6th, 1945, when the little boy atomic bomb exploded exactly 600 meters above ground zero on a day when exactly 60% of the Gregorian calendar year had been completed, on a day in which a six-pointed hexagram with its 6 points exactly 60 degrees apart at angles of 60 degrees of slope appeared in the sky above the city of Hiroshima, which of course couldn't be seen because it was daytime, while the man that supposedly authorized the use of the atomic weapon, President Harry S. Truman, he was the 33rd president, 3 plus 3 is 6, and he was the most worshipful Grandmaster Mason and 33-degree Freemason, 3 plus 3 is 6. Now, when this happened, Harry S. Truman was on a ship named the USS Augusta, and the name Augusta in the Latin language translates as sextile or sextilis, and a sextile is the number 6. The ship which delivered the atomic bombs to the island of Tinian, the USS Indianapolis, was attacked on her return voyage by an Imperial Japanese submarine, which launched 6 torpedoes all at once and sank the historic vessel 23 minutes after midnight, the witching hour, on July 30th, 1945, on a day when the sun was positioned at exactly 6 degrees in the constellation of Leo. Meanwhile, the atomic bomb that was dropped from the Enola Gay had the number 8655 painted on it. And 8 plus 6 plus 5 plus 5 equals 24, and 2 plus 4 equals the number 6. And this atomic bomb brought an end to World War II, which lasted exactly 6 years and killed exactly 60 million Christians and 6 million Jews. So the number 6 was the big star of World War II. Now you tell me that all those just happened to be coinky dinks. That sounds like planning to me, and deep planning.
Yep, very deep planning. Yeah. So anybody who's listening to this and you're still skeptical about numbers, it's time to wakey.
I mean, if people still don't get it, and if you're still resisting this, well, I could understand it. It's so horrible, you know. I could understand why you would want to do that. But, you know, come on. You're splashing around in the, you know, kindergarten kiddie pool of the intellect, you know, on something like that. Now, I wanted to talk about, too, the last, you know, couple things on the essential knowledge, the occult connections between the Washington Monument obelisk and the St. Louis Gateway Arch, the penis of Osiris and the arch of Baal, Baal. I sent you a picture. I hope you have it. If you don't, I'll resend it. When the St. Louis Blues, God bless them, just won their first Stanley Cup this year over Boston on top of it on their ice. Way to go, Blues. Everybody swarmed down to the newly renovated grounds at the St. Louis Gateway Arch. They had a big party, a parade that ended there, and a big party. So there's lots of aerial photos of that. The St. Louis Gateway Arch, they just redid the grounds where they covered over a highway so that now you can walk from downtown right to the riverfront. It's beautiful. They did a fantastic job. However, If you look at the grounds, it's in the shape, the grass is right in front of the gateway arch in the shape of a bell. So the St. Louis Gateway Arch is a arch of bell, ball, bale. You know, it only took them years and years and years to complete that. But the Masons, you know, they work very slowly. The interesting thing, too, about the St. Louis Gateway Arch, there's a couple things. It stands exactly 630 feet tall. So if you do the math on that, 630 feet times 12 inches per foot gives you a number. Let me double check that.
I'm looking at the picture you sent me to, Richard. It's unbelievable.
Oh, you got it?
Yes, it is a bell. Yep.
It's a bell. And if
Yep.
you look at a picture of the Liberty Bell, it's the same thing where it has that little hole at the top where you know, put the thing. So you get a number of the Gateway Arch in inches. If you multiply 630 feet times 12, you'll get this number. Take that number of the height of the Gateway Arch in inches and divide it by the number 20.7. The reason you do that is because in ancient Egypt, they had a royal cubit, like the Royal Arch of Freemasonry, the Royal Arch, and they had a sacred cubit. They had two different cubits. The royal cubit is 20.7 inches, you know, in our system. So my point is, if you divide the height of the Gateway Arch in inches by the length of the Egyptian royal cubit, 20.7, you get 365 and a quarter, which is the number of days in a Gregorian calendar year. Now, if you walk from the middle of the St. Louis Gateway Arch, if you could, you'd have to swim first. But if you went in a straight line to Washington, D.C., the St. Louis Gateway Arch, the Arch of Bell, Ball, Bale, lines up exactly on the 38th degree north from the equator with the Washington Monument obelisk. So there you've got your penis and your arch. And I'm in the process now because there is a number from, there's this, what I'm trying to say is 666 has got to be encoded in that in some form, you know, between the arch and the Washington Monument obelisk. Now, I could never figure out why they built these things 38 degrees north of the equator. I couldn't figure it out till one day I realized I was adding it from the equator, but the dark evil forces are computing it from the North Pole. So 90 degrees minus 38 degrees equals 52 degrees. And 52 is 13 times 4, like the playing card deck, you know.
Yeah.
It's all encoded.
Plus 38 degrees is 11, right? So we have a master number built into
right.
that number as well.
Master number, that's right.
Yep.
You know, they're busy little beavers, aren't they?
You know, it's mind-boggling though, Richard, and sometimes even myself, I have a hard time getting my head wrapped around the planning of all this stuff. It's not just the architecture, it's not just the stuff that we're talking about here, but it's in news stories, it's timestamps of news stories on the internet. It's everywhere. And so it goes back to what I was mentioning before. Is it built into the very fabric of reality? In other words, it's an algorithm, or do we actually have, you know, a ton of people in the priesthood that are calculating and manipulating reality every moment of the day? Did you know what I'm saying? I mean, it seems like it just seems to me like there's so many things in play where these numbers are there that it would seem impossible for a small group of people to be able to roll this all out. Just my thoughts.
Well, the kind of people that plan this stuff out, they don't have to worry about where their next paycheck's coming from. They've got all the money in the world. they've got most of the power right now in the world, even though people are waking up, and there will be a wrath and a reckoning at some point. People like you and I wouldn't be doing this if we had all the money in the world and all the time, and if we were sitting on our thrones. But this is what those people do to maintain their control. Plus, this kind of stuff, it's very spooky. There's a lot of people that get creeped out, and it's supernatural, and it keeps them in line a little bit.
Yeah, well, I know we'll get into this too, but even with the Beatles, the level of occultism and numbers is staggering. It just is, and I think to myself, wow, just about everything, if not everything, with that band was calculated and put into play via the numbers.
And we had no idea at the time. We were just tapping our toes,
Yeah, right.
Did I tell you I had a dream about him, by the way?
No, you're not the first person to tell me that. I had dreams with him in it, very lucid dreams. And another researcher, a friend of mine, said that they had the same experience where he showed up in their dreams and it was very real and very lucid. So, yeah, tell me about your dream.
Yeah, he says in memoirs, if I remember correctly, he says, dream of me.
Yes.
Well, after part one of the Occultology of the Beatles was broadcast, a little while after that, I don't remember exactly how long, I had a dream of him. And anyway, I walked into a room that was in some mansion in my dream. And when I came into the room, he was on my right, kind of behind me as I came through the door, and he was fussing around with a drum set. And I recognized him immediately. And he was bent over and he was arranging it. It had to be perfect. It had to, this had to be exactly here and here. I don't know, I don't know nothing about drums. So, I thought, well, that's interesting. There's Billy. So in my dream, I intentionally, somehow, I was like, I'm not going to make the first move. I'm not going to go up to him and, bother him like, other people do. So I decided in my dream, I'm going to mind my own business and see what happens. And I turned my back and I was watching some of the other people. There were lots of other guests or workers, some combination of friends, guests, and workers that were all doing things at a leisurely pace. And before very much time, I turned back to my right, and he was standing, almost towering over me, because he's taller than I am. And as soon as we locked eyes, I looked at him. I knew who he was. I don't know what he was thinking, but I said, "Hello, William." And I paused because I wanted to see his reaction. And he's a master card player, apparently, because he had no reaction. He had a poker face. And there was a bead or two or three or four or five there. And then I said to him, when I waited for just for some kind of tell, which he never gave me, I said, "You've really had a hard life." And when I did that, there were all these little micro expressions on his face, like he was trying to determine, was I being a smart ass, or was I kidding him? Was I serious? It really caught him off guard. And I could see his little micro expressions, like I said. So, and then the dream ended. And that was the end of my Billy dream.
Yeah, it's...
I didn't get to count his toes. Sorry, I didn't
Billy,
think of that in time.
Billy, take off your shoes.
Yeah. God, I could have solved the case. I'm still waiting. Have we ever figured out which of Billy's piggies went to market and which stayed home on that toe thing? I'm kind of still waiting for Dr. Scholl's bunion report before I weigh in on the 6-toe situation.
While we're on the feet, we should talk about this. Richard, you and I discovered this in our call the other day. So a lot of people have written to me or commented and they will say, Mike, why is he always showing us his feet? And even myself, I've said, him always showing his bare foot, whether he has 5 toes or 6 toes, it means something. There's a reason why he's always doing that. So let me read this, and I'll put the link down below, folks, so that you can take a look for yourself. But it's a website called allaboutheaven.org. And so here's what it says. The feet symbolize aspects of soul. The main distinction often made in visions is whether the feet are shod or not, whether the soul has a body. The foot without a shoe is a disembodied soul. Okay, let me read that again. The foot without a shoe is a disembodied soul. The foot with a shoe is an embodied soul. A shoe thus takes on the symbolism of the body. The shoes are symbolic of form, bare feet being symbolic of a disembodied soul. Now, when I found that, and Richard and I talked about it in our pre-show, that explains exactly why Billy keeps showing us his bare feet, because when he's doing that, he's revealing the disembodied soul of biological Paul McCartney. That's my interpretation of why he does that.
That's deep, Sage. I mean, yeah, that blew my mind when it was right there, the soul, SOUL, SOLE.
Right.
And, the sole of the foot also has a ball, Bale ball. It has an arch. And here's something interesting. I did some occultology on it. Each foot actually has 3 arches. It has an arch right after the ball, which is in between the toes. Then you have the ball, and then you have the arch. The one arch goes across the width of the foot, and then on each side of the foot, there's 2 other arches that come down towards the heel. So here's something that's going to blow your mind. There are 200,000 nerve endings in each sole of the human foot. 200,000 nerve endings divided by 3 arches equals 66,666.666.
I keep saying it's unbelievable. And I know you and I keep saying we have to stop saying that. So I'll say that's amazing.
It's believably unbelievable.
It just never ends.
And also, I also found out the sole of your foot is known as your second heart. I wouldn't have figured that, but
No, me neither.
yeah. Now, this is skipping ahead a little bit, but since we're on the toe part of the broadcast, the occult signature of William Wallace Shepard, or his double, with the 6 toes images. In ancient Egypt, they had this cult of Min, M-I-N, and we'll get back to him a little bit later when we talk about the Magical Mystery Tour, because they stop at a city called Bad Min. In that, when the bus breaks down and then it takes off, it stops at this place for lunch called Bad Min, which means body of men. Well, my point is, Min, he was the ancient Egyptian god of reproduction, and his cult in ancient Egypt was at Coptos, C-O-P-T-O-S, also sometimes spelled with a K, K-O-P-T-O-S. Now, that was back when ancient Egypt was taken over by the Greeks after Ptolemy was in charge. So this is a Greek name, for Egypt here in a middle period. Now, we know from the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover and the inside gatefold, Sgt. Pepper, William Wallace Shepard, wears an OPP, police sergeant's patch, which is altered to read OPD through some method. So Sergeant Pepper's wearing a police sergeant's badge or patch. That means Sergeant Pepper is a cop, a police officer. Min, his center, like I said, his cult center began at Coptos. So since William Wallace Shepard, Sergeant Pepper is a cop, and when he's in that picture with his wife, or his double is, with the 6 toes, almost practically waving them at the camera, what he's telling you, since Sergeant Pepper is a cop, it's like a little play on Coptos, the cult of men, the creator god, since William became the creator god of the Beatles, starting with the Sergeant Pepper's album when he took over. 6 albums, by the way. There's that. The original Beatles, they did 7 albums officially. There's arguments about that, but essentially they did 7. And then William was in charge of 6 albums. So the whole Coptos things is a sly, Masonic, wink, wink, nudge, nudge to Min, the creator god, like William is the creator god, and Coptos.
Well, there were 13 studio albums, and we go by the UK releases. So you're absolutely right about the 13 number of releases, Richard.
Yeah, as I recall, the sticking point is over Magical Mystery Tour on the US side of the pond, where in England, it was the first double EP, extended play. And on the American side, they put a few other songs on there and made a full album out of it.
Yeah, so in the UK, Magical Mystery Tour was not an album. Like you said, it was a double EP. And so it wasn't counted as an album. So if we count it, obviously there are 14. But typically it's not counted because it is not officially an album. So that means there were 13 releases.
Right.
Album
There's
releases.
that number again.
Yes. Right.
Well, I guess it's that old time that we should probably kick it up a notch, because we haven't been freaky enough, I don't think, we should probably talk a little bit about spirits and demons. Do you feel like talking about spirits and demons?
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that, Richard.
Because
let's lose more of our audience.
We have an audience? Yeah.
No, go ahead.
This will be a stepping stone to kind of take us into the Beatles, for anybody getting antsy about when's the Beatles? When are they going to talk about the Beatles? Okay. Spirits are the higher, lighter forms of vibrational consciousness, whereas demons are the lower, denser forms of vibrational consciousness that are, both of them are disengaged from the human body. Now, as we know from our last thrilling chapter, spirits in voodoo are referred to as Loa, and demons in voodoo are referred to as Petra. So even though both spirits and demons are non-corporal, meaning that they're life forms without a dense physical body here in the third, dimensional realm, both entities still absorb and utilize energy, though neither has a physical structure any longer. Here's an example. When a person becomes freshly dead, let's say, after a short period of time, after that moment where you realize, hey, I think I'm dead. There's my body. I can see it. I'm floating around. Hey, wait a minute. I'm still alive. I'm out of my body, but I'm alive. I got to tell everybody about this. There's life after death. Oh, wait, I can't. I'm a spirit now. I'm in a whole different realm. Oh, dang it. After you realize that realization, a little bit later, when you become freshly dead, you start to get hungry. Because, if you were still alive in your body, it's about the time, hey, I'd be eating a snack about now, and I can't eat a snack anymore. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I got these hunger pangs. Well, at that point, either you realize or your spirit guides tell you this or whatever, that all you have to do to absorb nutrients when you're in a spirit form is to either think about the great foods that you've had. Oh my God, those twice baked potatoes grandma used to make and those spadinis. Oh my God. If you just think about the memory, there's energy just in the memory when you're in a soul state. And the same thing, though, it applies to demons, which are the denser spirits. They actually absorb nourishment and nutrients, whatever you want to call it, food, by people's fear, by their horror, by their disgust, by the scent of death, by the smell of a battlefield with a bunch of dead, rotting corpses on it, 9/11, people dying in the fire. Demons actually absorb that energy and they feed on it. It's amazing.
As you were talking about the demons and the dense piece of this, Richard, ever since I was a kid, I have experienced sleep paralysis, where you're in bed and you're awake, but you can't move your body. But you're definitely in this different realm.
What does that last, like 6 seconds or something? It doesn't last a whole long, does it?
No, it doesn't last long. When you're there, it seems like it lasts longer than it actually is, but because you're in a place where time is not really linear or flowing, right? But it's a very interesting place to be in, because many people who have experienced sleep paralysis will tell you that it's a very dark place where it's dense, the energy is negative, and people who have sleep paralysis will also say that they have experienced entities, or demons, if you will, that appear to hover around them.
Wow.
And try to they try to get a rise out of the person by basically instilling fear. They like the fear part of it.
I've heard actually that people can have a heart attack because they panic, with the sleep paralysis. Some people can.
Yeah. So what happens is the way to get out of it is all you need to do is to get to move one of your extremities, like your hands or your feet or whatever. And as soon as you move, what happens is you are reconnected with your physical body. I've had it ever since I can remember, and I've deducted that what happens is you actually you are having an out-of-body experience, and you have kind of drifted off into a realm where these denser, negative, heavier energies or entities, this is where they reside. And the reason why I'm telling this story is because I don't have it anymore from a negative perspective. But when I was younger, it was scary. And it became obvious to me as I got older that that's what they wanted. They wanted the fear, because the fear is it's what they ate up. It's what nourished them.
Right.
And as soon as you realize that you didn't have to be fearful because they really can't do anything, that whole experience, as far as being dark and negative, went away for me. So I'm saying something here on the Paul is Dead channel that a lot of people are probably like, what? You got to be kidding me. I did talk about sleep paralysis on another show on my main channel. But anyway, so when you were talking about the demon piece of it, boy, I'll tell you what, I flashed back to sleep paralysis.
Wow. Well, let's take it a little bit further now, because let's go to the experts here. So now that we've established that the good spirits as well as the bad spirits, they take different forms of energy for their sustenance. By the way, you can't really stay in the soul state forever. You have to periodically reincarnate, because your you're radiating energy, even when you're in a form, you're radiating energy. So you have to go through that cycle of descending back into the dense realm and live a life and have experiences, and then when you die you're purified and you're in a pure soul state, and in fact, people talk about they see that white light, when they're going towards source.
Yeah.
What that actually is since the soul is electromagnetic energy, and space is very, very cold, the souls actually group together and go to the nearest star. So when we look at the sun, we just think it's a big atomic fireball in the coldness of space, but it's actually zillions of souls, in between in the Bardo state. They're communing, they're having a good time. And so that's why the sun, when you're going to it, when you're rising out of your body, you go to the nearest star. It's electromagnetic energy.
And you do rise up, that's for sure. I had a friend of mine who had an out-of-body experience, and he really didn't want to talk about it because he thought that people would think he was crazy. And he knew I was open to it, and so we sat down one time, this is going back years ago, and he told me all about it. He was 12 years old, and he rose up out of his body. He was floating above the body, and he was able to actually float into other rooms, and he could see his family in the waiting room and all that stuff. So
wow.
There is this process of rising up.
And at the same time, I remember a past life of dying where it also goes the other way at the same time somehow, where we're behind our eyes in a way and we're looking out. And then when you die at the same time that you go off this way, you go off inward too. It's bizarre. It's almost like you back up and you see that you were standing, in the darkness of your own self at the same time. It's freaky. It's like a perfect system though. It's amazing. God's doing a great job, man. Good for you.
Now, I know we're probably going off on a tangent here, or at least I am, but let me ask you this question. So when we say that, God has a perfect plan and God has perfected his creation, there are going to be people that are going to be listening to this and say, well, how is it that all of this evil takes place here? How is it that all of this occult is in play and creating all kinds of havoc and despair for people? So what would you say to somebody who asks you that question? On one hand, we're saying God has it under control, and then you're here in this 3D world, and it seems like everything's completely out of control.
Well, it's a way for the soul to know itself with each lifetime. Because when you're in the soul state, it's all pure love and energy, and any question you have, you know the answer before you even ask the question. So that's what's going on. It's a way for the divine oneness to break off little bits of the big soul. Essentially, what I'm stumbling around here trying to say is the obvious, that our consciousness is on loan from the God source, whatever you want to call it, by whatever name. We are all literally a piece of God.
Yeah.
And then we come down here and in this hellhole, and we find out about ourselves. What would we really do in that situation? What decisions did we make? How did it go? The future is always actuary. The future is all risk assessment. The past is always forensic, and where the past and the future always cross. You want to talk about the big witch's crossroad? Is right here today. Today is the only day that crosses yesterday and tomorrow, because tomorrow never gets here, and yesterday is dead and gone. You can't do nothing about either of them. So yesterday and today always cross today. This is the big crossing.
My view of this is that being here at this point in time on Earth is really an exercise for the soul to understand what it is like to be disconnected from source. What's it like to not have that connection, right? So we're in a period of time or a cycle right now where I call it the Iron Age. The Greeks use the Iron Age, the bronze, the silver, and the gold, right?
Right.
So we're in
And
an
all the
Iron Age now.
warfare with the tanks and the weaponry is all metal, you know.
Exactly.
But maybe
exactly.
we're segueing now into the consciousness age, or the electronic age is leading to the consciousness age. You know, maybe it's leading to where we'll be able to use our minds to communicate, and hopefully not with implants, you know, that they're pushing.
Right, right.
Especially in the forehead and the wrist, you know, the hand.
Yeah, well, the age of Aquarius, right? So we'll see. We won't be around to see it in full swing unless we decide to come back and have another go of it. But anyway, I know that I derailed us there, Richard. So we talked about spirits and demons, and where did you want to go next?
Yes, let's get back to those spirits and demons, because we don't want to make them angry with us. Now, okay, since we've established all that metaphysical stuff with the spirits and the demons, and we know how they take their sustenance, let's go back and look at this little aspect here. So this is all why, before his satanic ritual murder, Pope John Paul II was anointed with the Christos. In ancient Egypt, the Christos was the fat of the crocodile, by the way, the dragon, because the crocodile worships the sun and, you know, it's fierce and all this stuff. So anyway, when Pope John Paul II was made to become dead on cue, before they did that, hitting him with the silver hammer 3 times, calling out, "Are you dead yet? Tap. Are you dead yet? Tap. Are you dead yet? Tap." He was anointed with the Christos, which is the sacred olive oil, all over every inch of his about-to-be-dead body. The sacred olive oil used in the Vatican's rite of extreme unction was not for hygienic purposes. By applying the olive oil prior to his satanic ritual murder with the silver hammer, the soul, the spirit, the consciousness, the living consciousness of Pope John Paul II would literally cling to the dead corpse, and it's temporarily unable to separate itself and fly off into the next life. So that's why they killed him, and then they're doing this whole week-long ritual behind the scenes. And then when they entomb him during the moment of totality of the annular solar eclipse that looks like a halo in the sky, you know, that's showbiz right there. That's when they released his soul. And that's why also he was placed in 3 coffins, like the Russian dolls, coffins within coffins when he was entombed. One of them actually had a skull and crossbones on it. And they're trapezoid shaped. And according to Anton LaVey, who created the American Church of Satan in 1966 in San Francisco, where the Beatles had their final concert at Candlestick Park, according to Anton LaVey, he says many times that the trapezoid is the most satanic of shapes. It's essentially distorted geometry. So I guess, you know, that's kind of an expert. I think we can take his word for that on that. Now, my own occult research indicates, doing this on myself as an experiment I did, at my body temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit and my body weight of 150 pounds at that time, that my human soul has a mass of 1/5 of a gram per pound. So if anybody out there listening to this wants to discover the mass of your own soul, divide your body's temperature by the weight of your body converted from pounds into grams. So my findings indicate that the immortal soul basically has a mass equal to 0.22 grams per pound. So the sacred olive oil adheres the trying to depart soul to the lifeless carcass of the deceased. And this is what happened to John Paul II. And the reason that they did this was because they were creating a demonic resurrection, which is like a perversion of Christianity's, resurrection. Karol Wojtyla, who later became Pope John Paul II, he had a nickname, a childhood nickname called Lolek, L-O-L-E-K. And Lolek is remarkably similar to Molech, which is a version of Moloch. And Moloch and Molech are the occult demon to whom children were and still are sacrificed by burning. So according to occult philosophy, the two primary archdemons are Satan and Molech, which is another name for Baal. So Lolek was a satanic ritual human sacrifice to the archdemon Molech, passing through the fire of a solar eclipse. In his trapezoid coffin, the most satanic of shapes, at the key moment when his soul, departed because of the olive oil, which was making it cling. And when he was entombed beneath St. Peter's Basilica at the moment of totality of the annular solar eclipse on April the 8th, 2005 at 9:37 p.m., 1 week to the second after, he got dead, by the silver hammer, that's when the annular solar eclipse was taking place. And by the way, it turns out that annular solar eclipse was pretty special to the black magic occultists because it was the 13th solar eclipse since the new millennium. When Joseph Ratzinger went through his papal inauguration ceremony at the moment of totality, when he officially became Pope Benedict XVI, that was at the exact moment of totality of the 13th lunar eclipse of the new millennium. One last note about this, and then we'll get to the Paul is dead. There are 1,300 priests in the city of Rome, and a witch's coven, of course, is comprised of 13 members. One of the biggest witches' cults is the one Hillary Clinton belongs to. It's called the Mothers of Darkness, and they only have a certain amount of members. They have 13 times 13 times 13 members worldwide, which is 2,197 members of the Mothers of Darkness. And by the way, there's a Mothers of Darkness trilogy which stars Asia Argento, and she pronounces her name Asia Argento, but since she's a suspect in the murder of Bourdain, Anthony Bourdain, I'm going to call her Asia Argento. She stars in the Mothers of Darkness witch trilogy, and guess how it ends? If you can find footage on this, you should include it, because what happens to the big witch at the end of the Mothers of Darkness trilogy? An obelisk comes crashing through the wall and impales the witch by a big obelisk. Didn't see that coming.
Two other things that I wanted to bring up, just points of interest here. When we talked about the silver hammer, we have the Beatles' Maxwell's silver hammer.
Yes, that was so brilliant of you to make that connection.
Well, it just, as soon as you said the silver hammer and 3 times, and which says to me, obviously, that Billy is completely educated and immersed in the occult.
There's a hammer actually on his shield. It's a hammer or an axe, whichever way you want to look at it. And you want to talk hammers? Let's talk hardware store hammers here, because you're going to love this, Sage. In the year 1486, there was this book that came out when books were pretty rare, and it was the Witch Hunter's Manual, written in the year 1486. And this Witch Hunter's Manual is known as the Malleus Maleficarum, and that literally translates from Latin, the Malleus Maleficarum, from Latin, the dead language, into English as the witch's hammer.
All right. Well, let me run this one by you too. In the movie, a recent movie, it's called Yesterday, and I did a couple of videos on this. It's loaded up with Paul is Dead clues, but the main character goes by the name of Jack Malik, M-A-L-I-K, which sounds a lot like Moloch.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because we can even take that further. Yes, you're totally on course there to make that connection, but it goes further. In ancient Egypt, to fight or to make war was called Molka, and that's where Moloch comes from. MLK, just like Martin Luther King, on another level, MLK means to fight or to make war. So it's all tied in.
Yeah. Boy, oh boy.
And that's why Melchizedek is the first high priest mentioned in the Old Testament, if you look it up, because it's Melchizedek, Malka, to fight, to make war, the high priest of war. You can't have a Holocaust, by the way, without a high priest. So,
yeah.
Some people have some explaining to do there.
And that concludes another Sage or Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the description box below. And as always, I would like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can find all my social media and web links by visiting my hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to check out my music and album releases. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone with the next show. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.